believe in the state. I'm 21, and the reason that I endorse Matt, is he really supports having voices that we haven't previously heard in politics really get that voice. He was elected to the House of Reps at age 22, and although I'm 21, I can see a lot of similarities with his ability to lead by example. So I really appreciate his time to support me and support members of our community who are either low income, young adults, or people of color who previously didn't have a voice. So thank you so much, Matt, and it's my pleasure to introduce my representative for the House, Coach Kevin Christie, who is just as great as he sounds.
Thank you all for being here. Becca, thank you. I'd like to just share my reasons for supporting Matt. They go back a long way. 1973, when Matt was 4 years old, and his dad, who became my attorney, and I became his mechanic, drove into my station, and I was only 23 at that point too. Geez, this whole 22, 23 thing, I don't know. But that's what started the relationship, you know, with his family. And when we talk about his pedigree, his Vermont pedigree, you know, think about having a dad who marched with Dr. King and was put in jail as a result of that, and then moved to Vermont to become one of our attorneys and started Windsor County Partners and other organizations in Windsor County that have really helped young people and families throughout the state. And then to take on the educational pedigree comes Mom, Faith Dunne. When I met her, she was working on her degree to become Dr. Faith Dunne with a doctorate in education. Later became the chair of the education department at Dartmouth and a specialist in rural education. So when we wonder where this comes from, I think that piece of history tells us a lot. And I know my friends, Faith and John Bailey Dunne, are up there looking down with immense pride on their son and the next governor of the state of Vermont, Matt Dunne.
Hi, my name is Barb Grimes, and I think today represents, we started with the youngest, and now we're at the oldest, all representing the same person. I've known Matt for some 25 years. He grew up in Vermont. He went away to college at Brown University, came back to Vermont. Doesn't always happen with our youth, and at almost 70, he is youth. Matt served 4 terms in the House. I was a legislator at the time, watched him grow in stature and leadership. He left, became a director for VISTA, right? Under both Clinton and Bush. One of the things that has impressed me over time with Matt is his commitment to everyone. Not in 1,000 different directions, but sort of making it clear that he's for all of the people. He had tough votes when he was in the legislature representing a town on the Connecticut River that their ideas didn't always coincide with where I was from on the other water side of the state, Lake Champlain. But he was thoughtful, he was out there, and he was caring. He's a married guy. You can see up and back his wife Sarah. Abe, Judson, and Cora are here today to root their dad on. I really believe that Matt is the right person to lead Vermont in a new sustainable direction that works for all Vermonters. So I'm proud to introduce my friend and the next governor of the state of Vermont, Matt Dunne.
Thank you, Barb, and thank you for not telling other stories about our time together in the legislature. And thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Beck, wherever you are, because you're an inspiration to me. And I would also like to thank my family who's here, and a particular shout out to my in-laws who are up top, who are the most extraordinary in-laws one could ever have and really make all this happen. And I want to just take a minute before I begin to recognize what many of you may have heard, which is about the Amtrak derailment that took place a little less than an hour ago. I understand that there are some injuries, and our thoughts are with the people who were a part of that accident, and just want to acknowledge that, and we'll be keeping track of the information as it comes in, and you never know what to expect. It is great to be here in Barre. Barre is a city that was built with strong arms and backs. It is the granite capital of the world, and it's a place that sparked progressive ideals out of the labor hall, technology in the quarries, and the arts, and a commitment to artistic excellence that is not only seen here in this park, but across the country. And there is no better place to be talking about the future of Vermont than here in Barre. I've had a lot of opportunities in my life. I had the chance to grow a Vermont-based business to over 100 employees. I had the chance to head up the AmeriCorps VISTA program under Bill Clinton, leading 6,000 people to empower people out of poverty. And today I work from an office in the top of an old bread factory building in downtown White River Junction, and Sarah and I are raising our family in the farmhouse where I grew up. And I was always raised to believe that it's not what you get, but what you give. And all I have gotten is because of this great state of Vermont. But what I want to give to Vermonters, whether they live in Rutland or Reigate, Burlington or Bennington, or Guildhall or Guilford, is the opportunity to build their future right here in the state of Vermont. The opportunity to build a future here, though, is dependent on one thing, and this is why I'm running for governor, which is we must build an economy that works for all of Vermont and for all Vermonters. Over the last month and a half, I and a group of amazing volunteers have traveled across the state, holding gatherings in 20 different communities over all 14 counties. And we saw some pretty inspiring things. We saw technology companies that were changing markets globally and locally. We saw farmers who were shipping value-added food all over the country. And we met Vermonters who were working for Fortune 500 companies from their homes. We saw contractors who were taking vacant lots and empty buildings in White River Junction and in Burlington and turning them into housing and cool retail space and co-work areas for entrepreneurs to collaborate and to thrive. We saw again and again what reminded us that we live in an extraordinarily beautiful place. We saw our lakes and our valleys and our hills, each part of the state unique and powerful. And the beer. We tasted world-class beer from one end of the state to the other. And it made that travel. Anyway, but we also heard something else, which was a state that is at a crossroads. We heard from a couple in Franklin County that now has to drive each over 2 hours a day to get their child to daycare, to get to their job, to rush back to pick up the child, and to get home in the hopes of having dinner together. We heard from a couple in Addison who are having to move out of the state because one of them lost their job and is not able to find another one in her career. But also talked to a business person in Warren who can't find people to work. We heard from school board members in the Northeast Kingdom who are afraid that a new law is going to force their community-based school to close, and that kindergartners in their town are going to have to commute an hour a day just to get to school. We heard from people in the southern part of our state where they have seen an increase in poverty of 50%, and heard for the first time for me that 10% of the children in North Hero are homeless. We heard from people who are struggling every day to make ends meet and to be able to provide for their family, despite the fact they have been doing the same kind of work for the last 20 years. And we heard in different parts of the state from people who had come out to a political event over a year before an election day that they didn't know if attending town meeting or joining their school board mattered anymore. What we heard was a state that was at risk of losing what is our most powerful asset, which is our sense of community. And if we lose that, Vermont will cease to be Vermont. And I know that because I was raised by one of those communities. You see, when I was 13 years old, my father passed away. He was 39, about 6 years younger than I am today. And at that moment of loss, the town of Hartland was there for me. They were my rock and my backstop. At a time when I could have gone down a dark path or not lived up to my full potential, they were there to lift us up and keep us going. Neighbors brought meals. They helped us with the chores. They made sure we had enough wood. And when I started helping with the bills in the household later that year, I had mentors to help me. And what I didn't realize at the time is that they were really teaching me the values of Vermont. And as a result, that's who I am. That's who we are. That's how Sarah and I are raising our family. And I'm running for governor because we can't allow that sense of community to be lost in our state. But to keep the state that we love, we must change. And to change, we need to have new leadership. Leadership that has the ability to move beyond the traditional structures of state government. That's able to bring people together around specific goals and bring collaboration and the best from the public, the nonprofit, and the private sector. We need new leadership that is deeply connected to the state of Vermont, but has also been around the country to understand what it is that we can do. I've had the opportunity to transform AmeriCorps VISTA, an organization nearly the size of the state of Vermont. But I've also had the experience of running a 2-person company, as well as helping a business grow to over 100 employees here in Vermont. In the last 5 years, I've led a team that has helped to bring gigabit speed internet to communities around the country. But I've also led a team to help bring Vermont businesses online. And it's this experience that came from Vermont that has given me the background to do what a governor needs to do day one, which is to start to build an economy that works for all Vermonters and all of Vermont. An economy that works for all of Vermont is one that doesn't spend a lot of time running around the country trying to get a large corporation to land their campus here in Vermont, but instead supports and gets capital to our inspiring homegrown entrepreneurs. An economy that works for all of Vermont is as committed to telling people where they can develop as we are in defending the places we should not. To make sure that we protect our prime ag soils, but make it easier to redevelop abandoned industrial sites. An economy that works for all of Vermont actually delivers high-speed internet to every corner of our state, to be able to release the power of our people in our hills and the talent in our towns. An economy that works for all of Vermont is one that takes the bold step to create a $100 million ESCO efficiency investment fund to make sure that we have the most efficient rental housing, commercial space, and public buildings in the entire country, putting contractors to work, dramatically reducing our carbon footprint and reducing our costs. But an economy that works for all of Vermont understands that that means we must lift up all Vermonters. And that includes doing a micro-enterprise fund to reach out to displaced workers across the state to help them start their own small businesses and rebuild a middle class. An economy that works for all Vermont also tackles the heroin epidemic we are facing as the public health crisis that it is, that puts boots on the ground to prevent additional addiction and provides treatment that isn't just about maintenance, but actually putting people on the path to recovery. An economy that works for all of Vermont is an economy that has leadership, that has run a small business, that understands the difficulty of being able to keep up with the paperwork and brings together the parts of government so that we can have as efficient an enterprise as possible and cut red tape for small businesses and entrepreneurs to get started. And an economy that works for all of Vermont is one that fixes our broken healthcare system, that makes sure that websites work, and that keeps us on the path to universal healthcare reform, because I think we can all agree that healthcare is a human right. And an economy that works for all of Vermont is one that invests in technology in our educational system so that we can deliver the best education to our children in our rural state without taking down our community-based schools. but to bring an economy that works for all of Vermont. To do any of the things that we have talked about, we must first rebuild trust. As we traveled around the state talking to people, they voiced some deep concerns. There was a cynicism that has not been the tradition of Vermont politics. There were people who got involved 10, 12 years ago full of hope that they could make a difference both in their state and in the nation, who aren't sure that politics really can make that big of a difference. There is clear dysfunction that is happening in Washington. What I heard from Vermonters was concern that what's happening in Montpelier might not be that much better. And that's why it is past time that we had an ethics commission in the state of Vermont to rebuild the trust we need. But to build an economy that works for all of Vermont, we need to bring that vision to all Vermonters. We need to have people involved in this campaign and in this effort who are not part of the process today. We need young people. We need entrepreneurs who are about to discover a new solution to a global problem. We need people who are struggling to get by, and we need people who volunteer hours every week at their local nonprofit but don't think their vote matters. We need people who get up in the morning before the sun rises and comes home after their children are asleep. And we need senior citizens who have dedicated a life to their state, but don't hear in the future that is being articulated a place for them. Because if we're going to create a Vermont economy that works for all of Vermont, we need to all be in this together. Now, those of you who have been involved in my campaigns before, and there are some of you out there, know that I don't take a conventional approach. And here's where I need your help. We need to reach out to all of these people who have felt disconnected. We need to get on social media, and we need to make phone calls. We need to demonstrate that we are a campaign that will walk the walk and get things done in communities as part of the campaign. And we need to knock on thousands of doors. We need to make sure that every Vermonter knows that this is a campaign that wants them to be involved and wants them to be involved in moving our state forward. As I mentioned before, am with Sarah raising our family in the farmhouse where I grew up. And we have 3 kids, Judson, Abe, and Cora, and they're with me today. They are an energetic and inspiring and sometimes exhausting crew, filled with hopes and ideas. And anyone who's become a parent knows that it changes you. It changes your priorities, and it changes your outlook. And what it changed in me was a sense of urgency. And when I drop off my kids at Hartland Elementary School, usually on time, the elementary school where I went, and I think about what I've heard from Vermonters across the state, I realize that the clock is ticking. And that is why the next governor cannot be a caretaker governor and cannot be a governor that tells Vermonters, you are on your own. This campaign needs to be about action, and it needs to be about urgency. Because we all need to come together to create a Vermont of our future that is based on our tradition of innovation and committed to our deep sense of community. This has to be a campaign about all of us. If you, as I do, believe that the time is now, let us start today to reach out to Vermonters across the state to build on the Vermont that we love in order to create the Vermont for the next generation. Thank you. Thank you all for coming out.